attracted so much attention from many spheres of society, including the political arena. We're now joined by the leader of Build One South Africa, Mmusi Maimane, who's calling on the Police Minister Bheki Cle to resign. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this afternoon. So you believe this is not just about Thabo Bester, but there's obviously a sophisticated network that allowed for this to happen.
Good afternoon. First and foremost, I maintain that today, if you are a victim of Thabo Bester, you're sitting watching a theater take place in front of you and you feel secondary violation, I would imagine, given the state of the fact that there's an absence of justice. Secondly, I think it speaks broadly to the issue of how the fact that 70 or just between 67 and 70 of our fellow countrymen are murdered every day to no consequence. We need to reform the whole police system. When I talk about the 10-point plan which we tabled, ultimately we've got to bring policing closer to the ground. And so Minister Bheki Cele, in this instance, who leads the National Police Service, has failed. And every single day is a genuine failure around policing crime, around arresting criminals, around keeping prisoners in prison. And ultimately, that people are able to continue crime, even from police cells, is actually an indicator of the fact that South Africa is genuinely, the cancer of our country around crime is exacerbated by the fact that we have an ineffective police ministry and an ineffective police minister. And so I stand on it, he must resign.
Is it just about the police ministry or also the justice department as well?
The silence of Minister Ronald Lamola must be called upon. I want the Ministry of Justice to come and demonstrate to the people of this country how the ecosystem of justice is collapsing. The reality is, when you look at correctional services, and I happen to interact with a number of prisoners, it often strikes me how they're able to get basic services like cell phones, how in fact things are being smuggled in and out of prison as we speak, and how ultimately communities feel profoundly vulnerable when they think to themselves there'll be a criminal who is able to mobilize criminal activities as retribution against often witnesses, as retribution often against the very people that they've stolen from. And so you've got communities living in fear whilst the criminals are walking around freely. We should invert that. We should get the criminals to live in fear, that you'll get arrested, and furthermore, you will stay in prison, and the criminal justice system must address that. At this point in time, there's a failure at arrest, there's a failure in the criminal justice system, so much so that when you look at real numbers as to how many people sometimes end up spending time in jail without the prospect of being in trial, etc., that number is closer to about 300 days, which is a concerning number, meaning that actually the system isn't being able to get people from arrest to conviction. Most people will tell you that actually the number of convictions around people arrested for murder sit way below 20%, which means that in fact your probability of being arrested for committing crime in this country is becoming less. And what Thabo Bester proves is that even after you've been arrested, some privileges continue and you've got potential to be able to mastermind a crime of escape from inside the prison cell.
Speaking of privileges continuing, even though you're in a prison cell, the Correctional Services statement spoke of this being a public-private partnership between the prison, the specific facility in Mangaung, which is operated by G4S, if I'm not mistaken. And so what do we need to understand about these public-private partnerships, or do we need to know more about the public-private partnerships and private prisons that are being operated by people outside of the police, the criminal justice system, or the justice department?
Yeah, that's not unique to South Africa. You can go all over the continent, you can go all over the world. Prison services and provision of prison services isn't necessarily, it's a function upon which when the state hasn't got capacity to build more prisons, the private sector steps in, right? That's a normal thing. But almost immediately, when a breach of that nature takes place, it triggers particular action that not only revokes the capability of the company to continue the service, but it adds additional penalties to that type of negotiations. PPPs are going to be a normal part of life. We've got private hospitals as we do have public hospitals. We've got particular hospitals that have got a combination of both, where the private sector works a particular ward. So this is not a unique thing. It's the same in security. You've got private security and public security. The point at the end of the day is that there are particular standards, there are particular processes. And that's why I come back. When I highlight this issue about the 10-point plan that we've raised and saying bring policing locally, because ultimately you ensure that intelligence sits closer to the ground. You also ensure that the criminal justice system is far more reactive because communities are more involved, and the ability to be able to arrest is far more expedited because you've got also the Metro Police involved, you've got private security involved, and you've got public policing involved so that you can quickly arrest the criminals. Because crime isn't committed by everyone in South Africa. It's committed by the same people every single time on a repeated basis. That's why they've got the confidence to capture the entire system, where they can start with the policeman at the police station, continue with the warden at the correctional service, and ultimately corrupt the entire system where criminals are effectively running our country.
You speak of the 10-point plan and bringing it closer to the community. Do we have an appreciation or an understanding of what enables crime to thrive in South Africa? Because we've got that. We've got private security, we've got the police, but then you also find that, one, the community is not willing to go forth and give that information, and that could be because of a myriad of issues. Maybe you find that these criminals actually protect the communities. We speak to policing unions who tell you that police officers do not get paid enough to put their lives on the line. And so what is it that keeps on enabling and emboldening people to thrive in crime in South Africa and actually get away with it?
Yeah. It's a genuine perception right now amongst criminals that says to them, we can get away with all of this. You speak to any mother in any community, will tell you they know where the drug dens are. They know who's distributing drugs, but people know. There's a genuine perception that says we'll never get arrested. And here's one stat that I think we need to zone in on. And that's why when I say it's bringing it down, it's not just localizing police, it's increasing numbers. Because here's the first fact. International norms tell us that, in fact, to be effective at fighting crime, the ratio of police person per citizen needs to be between 1 to 350, somewhere there. If you come with me to my community in Dobsonville, you get to 1:1,200. That's one. The police, that same police person, doesn't have prioritization. We haven't prioritized murder. We haven't prioritized all of that. So they are dealing with a myriad of crimes that are before them. Motor vehicle accident can take the same priority as rape, as take the same priority as murder, in the eyes of that particular investigating officer. The capacitation of police stations is poor, in the sense that you don't have vehicles, and the training of those policemen is poor. And then by the time it gets to the court system, the presentation of evidence, where sometimes dockets can be bought, and all of those issues, mean that you are dealing within a broader ecosystem where ultimately criminals know they can get away with murder. They know it. So we have to invert that. So when I talk about localizing it, I also mean, as we saw in National Shutdown, because funny enough, for the first time we had police presence, but it was augmented by the army. I'm saying, no, you don't need the army. What you actually need in a country where there's more private security than there are actual police, aggregate those into the thing, add Metro Police, add the SEPs to it, bring intelligence local to the ground, so that we know so-and-so in this community is committing a crime, and all agencies have to be able to find them, arrest them, so that when the evidence is presented before a court, the conviction can be secured, and we can ensure that those who do the crime ultimately do the time.
If not Bheki Cele, you call for his resignation, then whom? Maybe not a personality, and maybe not whom being the question, but what kind of system do we need in place to get a handle on the situation in South Africa? This situation with Thabo Bester is literally... It's just but one thing that pops up every once in 10 years. We had the Ananias Mates of this world, and here we are in 2023 sitting with this movie that is playing out in front of us. So what do we replace that with?
One, I've always maintained that we need to democratize policing. And imagine if you, as an ordinary citizen, were able to not only even directly vote or select your regional commander, so that you know who the police person is. They are accountable to the people. Because at this point in time, because you've got a minister, as Bheki Cle, who has inordinate powers, is able to appoint even the generals, even the senior lieutenants, they're not accountable to the people. They feel they must just do whatever the minister wants to tell them. Crime affects all of us. Give power back to the people. So when we've set up CPFs in communities, what I'm calling for is for more greater intervention of communities and accountability, so that ultimately people know police is a service. They work for the community, not the other way around. And community policing is also increasing. You're seeing people volunteer for that. Train and capacitate those people and let them work under a leadership that comes from there. Because so long as you keep this current minister in charge and him believing that he must protect the ANC, today, I'll be honest with you, sometimes I can appreciate why a victim of rape would feel they wouldn't want to go report a crime. Even I myself sometimes feel that when you have to go into a police station and repeat a crime, if ultimately it ends up with some executive decision driven by the minister who has a thumbs down on the National Police Commissioner, you've got a real and a legitimate problem at the end. It means that you are reporting crime to the criminals, and it's not helping anybody. So what I'm calling for is that let's bring accountability lower down, let's have direct election, and let's make sure the process of appointing the National Police Commissioner is far more transparent, so that all of us know that person, actually, here are their credentials, they've come within the force, and they can lead the force. Because so long as we go through this revolving door of National Police Commissioners, who even the current one doesn't have apparently security clearance, tells you that in fact there cannot be leadership that provides command, that commands direction and prioritization amongst the police.
Build One South Africa leader, Mmusi Maimane, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.